You know it's this. Take a perk and a talk of that shit. Money swallowed like sis. Did it perfect in the kid. Got a billion who sang on my head. Look at better put on the road I just spent. I know we got $1 million. The devil that shit ain't not cheap again.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to MangaMuse. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the second part of What If Deku Enters Persona series. Special note, this fanfic is written and a masterpiece of Mugiwara and no Luffy on FANFICTIONnet. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. To say that Izuku was confused would be an understatement. Now, he wasn't freaking out like he normally would, but only because there was nothing inherently threatening in front of him. Even so, this strange scenery that had replaced the school building he saw only the day before caused Izuku to rub his eyes, thinking that perhaps he was only seeing things. When nothing changed, he couldn't help but look around. Maybe they ran down the wrong alleyway. The problem with that theory was that the rest of the surrounding architecture was identical to what he had seen yesterday. The sign that sat at the front of the stone wall was also a strange indicator that they were supposedly at the right place. Did the drama club set this SHT up or something? Ryuji muttered next to him, Izuku throwing a sideways glance back at his upperclassman. There's no way though, is there? I was here yesterday and it looked like a normal school building. Izuku muttered, his eyes scanning the castle for clues. You would need an amazingly fast construction quirk for this to be possible, even then, considering how much the school would have to pay for this change in aesthetics and how it would most likely have to inform the parents first before even thinking of making such a drastic change. Not to mention this is meant to be a normal high school in the first place. True, I guess. Ryuji mumbled, feeling overwhelmed by Izuku's train of thought. But still, the sign says it's our school. Should we just go in and see what's up? Izuku gulped as he looked at the foreboding structure before them. I suppose we don't have much choice. Izuku admitted. If they were going to understand what was going on, they couldn't remain outside and keep guessing. Alright, guess we'll go in then. Ryuji muttered before glancing at Izuku. Why you first? And me? Izuku blanched, looking at his senior in disbelief. Oh okay, yeah, maybe that's a bit much to ask my junior. Ryuji sighed, grabbing his bag straps and tightening his hold on them. Just stick close behind me, at least. This place is giving me the creeps right now. With that, the two proceeded through the school gates, which were now made of paved sandstone bricks instead of concrete. Izuku wished he could have written this off as the work of the drama club, but the castle looming over them was far too real to be cardboard. The entrance alone was far too realistic for a school project. There was even a wooden drawbridge and a raised steel gate. Once the two walked through the main entrance, they were greeted by a grand hall far more opulent than anything Izuku had seen the day before. This makes no sense. Even if it was somehow plausible that they changed the exterior of the building, the interior couldn't have been renovated so quickly. Okay, so that didn't clear anything up. Ryuji huffed out, most likely coming to the same conclusion as Izuku. Seriously, there's no way this can be the school, right? It's not possible. I think we should leave. Izuku said cautiously, gazing around the hall. It was definitely far too large to be the same building he had visited yesterday. There's no way they could have rolled out rows and rows of red carpet, lit rows of candle stands, and added a grand staircase in the span of single day. Nothing about this place was logical. Not if it was truly in the same place that Shujin Academy once sat. Even if it weren't, Izuku most likely would have heard of such an extravagant building in the city. Ryuji seemed to consider this idea, taking a moment to pull his phone out of his pocket and try and run a web search on it. What the hell? No service? DMN it, the faux blonde cursed, gazing around the hall again. But the sign said Shujin Academy. Halt. A new, distorted voice caused both Izuku and Ryuji to yelp in surprise, the two glancing to their left to the source. The green-haired teen could only widen his eyes as he saw the approaching mass. It was a large man in armor several sizes too large for him if the legs were any indication. Instead of wearing the helmet's visor down, he wore a blue expressionless masquerade mask. The man also carried a large shield that Izuku could hide his entire body behind in one hand and a long sword in the other. The armored man, whoever he was, approached with obvious aggression. Izuku felt himself taking a step back in fear, a bit of sweat rolling down his brow. What the hell, man? You scared me there for a sec. Ryuji breathed out, relaxing for a moment. That's a hell of a costume, though. You make that? Or wait, is that part of your quirk, maybe? The armored man stopped several meters away from the two of them, his eyes hidden behind the mask and only allowing a faint red light to shine through the sockets. Ryuji shifted uncomfortably, stuffing his hands in his pockets. Well, come on, man. Don't just stand there and say nothing. The faux blonde felt a hand tug at the sleeve of his blazer, glancing back to see Izuku biting his bottom lip. Sakamoto-senpai. I think we should leave. Izuku muttered out, pulling a bit harder with his whole body to try and drag Ryuji away. Whoa, slow down man, Ryuji started before glancing back at the armored man from before. Much to his shock, someone in an identical suit of armor appeared. In fact, the newcomer was practically identical to the first armored man. What the hell? Sakamoto-senpai. We should go. Izuku ushered him again. While slightly thrown off by the other knight's appearance, Ryuji nodded and went along with his junior's idea. Gee, got it. Let's go. The faux blonde agreed, spinning on his heel to run for it. Izuku wasn't far behind, the two soon breaking into a sprint for the exit. But they skidded to a stop as several more armored men appeared, all much larger than either of the teens. What the hell? How many of them are there? Will have to find another way. Izuku tried to tell him, only for a shield to ram right into his back. Hey. Midoriya. Ryuji gasped in shock, turning to see a knight was standing right behind the smaller teen. I've got at least some stored up in my left knee. Bending his left knee, electricity started to crackle around him. In a sudden burst of energy, Ryuji was launched forward straight into the knight, ramming it with his shoulder. The knight was sent tumbling backward from the momentum of Ryuji's charge. But the teenager's shoulder began to ache from driving his shoulder right into a full suit of armor. Sadly, it wasn't his shoulder that hurt the most though, his right knee buckling just as he was about to get to his feet. It, we've gotta move. He glanced back at Izuku, only to see the green-haired teen was completely unconscious. Ryuji desperately reached forth to grab under his arms and carry him. I've got just enough for one more burst and dash. Another knight came out of nowhere, knocking Ryuji face first onto the ground. Ack. It, the faux blonde cursed, gnashing his teeth as he glared back at the knight who stopped him. Why, you're gonna break something. Seize them. Another one of the knights ordered. The last thing Ryuji saw was the knights crowding around them as one of them brought a shield down on his head. Izuku had to peel his eyelids open as he finally woke up, still dazed from being beaten unconscious. It took him a moment to collect his thoughts, only remembering that he and Ryuji had started to run away from the strangely armored men. Hey, you're up. Izuku quickly sat up, immediately regretting it as a sudden case of vertigo made his head spin. Careful, man. You took a pretty strong hit on the head. Did I? Izuku muttered, holding the side of his head for a moment longer before opening his eyes again. Ryuji was sitting a barrel nearby. The moment Izuku had regained his bearings, he took in the room around him, an old-fashioned dungeon cell. The wall and ceiling were all paved with stone bricks with a bloody red sheen. Chains used for prisoners hung from the walls and lied strewn across the floor. A couple of barrels like the one his senior sat on lay close by. Izuku's new surroundings reminded him of the room from his previous dream, though it didn't feel the same as his cell from that velvet room. "You okay, man?" asked Ryuji. "Why yeah, not too bad now. How about you?" Izuku muttered, rubbing a bump that had formed on the back of his head. He probably had a concussion. "Not too bad, I think. My shoulder's pretty sore though," Ryuji admitted with a sigh, rubbing his muscles to relieve some of the pain. Getting up and looking around the cell, the faux blonde couldn't stop a curse from escaping his mouth. "Looks like this ain't a dream, after all." Losing patience rather quickly, Ryuji rushed up to the bars and started to bang on them. "Hey! I know someone's out there. Get over here and let us out, DMN it. Sakamoto-senpai, you should be careful." Izuku pushed himself off the bench he was lying on and stood up. "We don't know where we are or who has us. We have to be careful not to anger them. TCH, son of a beach." Ryuji snapped, hitting the bars one last time and causing Midoriya to flinch again. "Where the hell are we? You really think someone's just up and kidnapped us? And if so, why in a friggin' castle?" I don't know. "I don't know any more than dash." Before Izuku could finish, a far-off scream caused the two to pause. They both ran up to the cell bars, gripping it as they tried to listen in. Faint moans of agony could be heard, quieter than the previous scream. Someone else is here, and they're being tortured," Izuku muttered, his face going pale at the thought. "And no way man, no way." Ryuji began to panic, gripping the bars strong enough to turn his knuckles white. He spun around and began desperately searching for anything he could use. There's gotta be some way out of this DMN cell. "And maybe we could try to find a weakness in the wall," Izuku suggested, turning his attention back to the cell as well. As much as he wanted to help whoever might be suffering, he had to focus on getting out as well. Ryuji was soon running his hands along one of the walls. Izuku jumped to the opposite end, hoping to find one there as well. I hope this might not be too much to ask, but, what's your quirk?" Izuku asked, hoping the faux blonde might be able to give them an escape route. "My quirk?" Ryuji repeated before realizing the reason behind it. Oh. Well, you see, I can store up energy in my kneecaps. It converts it into electricity or something that pretty much makes me run wicked fast. I can run twice as fast with moderate energy use, or move super fast in short bursts. I see, that's a rather strong quirk, actually," Izuku murmured in surprise as he continued to search for loose bricks or faults in the foundation. Ryuji might be able to break them out after all, but he doubted that it would work on the steel bars. It would probably be better used against a weakened part of the wall. "I have to run to store up energy though, and after some recent SHT, I can only store energy in one knee." Ryuji's voice seemed to weaken as he continued. Izuku stopped his search for a moment to glance back at him, his senior now looking even more crestfallen than before. I can barely use it anymore. When I do, I bust up my right leg from the exertion. It's almost useless to me now." Izuku now realized that Ryuji probably wasn't going to bust them out with his quirk after all. The look on his cellmate's face was disheartening. With a weak, forced chuckle, the green-haired teen rubbed the back of his head. Hey, it's better than being quirkless, you know." Ryuji turned to Izuku in confusion. "Quirkless? What do you mean by?" His eyes widened as the realization dawned of him. "Wait, you mean you don't?" Izuku gave a weak nod, forcing a sad smile to show Ryuji that he understood his pain. Before the two could continue, they heard a parade of clanking metal approaching them. The two teenagers quickly perked up and turned to the cell doors to see the knights that had attacked them before gathering around the cell. Hey. Hurry up and let us out. Ryuji snapped again, rushing up to the bars and pounding on them. Quiet, prisoner, and rejoice that your punishment has been decided so quickly. The knight at the front spoke, taking a step closer toward the cage. You have both been judged with unlawful entry of the palace. A crime punishable by death. What? What the hell are you talking about? Ryuji spat in frustration, the mention of a death penalty throwing him into an, understandably, panicked moment. This makes no sense at all. We don't even know where we are. Midoriya spoke up this time. No one's allowed to do as they please in my castle. Izuku and Ryuji paused as they watched the knight step aside to make way for a strangely dressed man was approaching the cage. Izuku instantly recognized him as the man in the car from this morning, though his attire had changed drastically. Instead of the tracksuit from before, he wore a velvety red cape littered with pink hearts that was lined with white fur around the edges. A small, spiked crown made of gold sat atop his head. Aside from this, he was virtually naked, only wearing brown loafers and pink underwear to maintain some semblance of modesty. Wait a sec. Kamoshida, blurted Ryuji. The teacher you mentioned before. Izuku muttered as he struggled to wrap his head around this. Even the worst hero costumes didn't look this bad. To think, rather than some petty thief, it would be Sakamoto who decided to break into my beloved castle, Kamoshida scoffed, smirking smugly at the faux blonde. What, did you come here seeking revenge? The hell is going on, Kamoshida? The hell are you wearing? And where the hell are we? Ryuji snapped indignantly, his confusion only growing with the arrival of the sports instructor. I told you before, you slow-witted child. You are in my castle. But I'm sure you already knew that, Kamoshida huffed before glancing at Izuku. I have to say, I would have figured you to bring someone about as brutish as you are if you were looking for revenge. Maybe you were planning on using him as bait instead? I have no idea what hell you're talking about, but... Ryuji growled again, shaking the bars as he spoke. Is that how you speak to a king? Kamoshida snapped back to Ryuji, a heated glare now sent his way. Perhaps you need to be informed exactly what position you're in, just like last time. Not only are you both guilty of trespassing in my castle, but you are now guilty of insulting the king. An evil smile spread across his lips, one that sent shivers down Izuku's spine. Both are crimes punishable by death. Ryuji and Izuku both paled, backing away from the cell doors. Why you're shitting me? Ryuji muttered, thinking that the teacher was only trying to scare him. It's time for an execution. Grab the blonde one. Kamoshida ordered. The knights stood at attention at his command. The one closest to the cell pulled out a pair of keys from God knows where, opening the cell and walking in with a line of knights behind him. Izuku was knocked against the wall as they entered, their focus going mainly to Ryuji as they started to surround him. Sakamoto-senpai. Izuku cried out in fear, eyes darting around for options that might be available to him. He had to figure a way out of here, a way to get both of them to safety. I have to think up something quick. This guy is serious about killing us. If I don't act quick, then Sakamoto-senpai will be. To hell with this SHT. Electricity crackled around Ryuji's left knee, and in a burst of speed, he knocked down two of the knights blocking the entrance. Ack, he cried out in pain, his knee acting up again as he stopped before he could try anything else. DDMN, I already messed it up some earlier. He cursed, glancing to the side to see a knight lurking over him. Jigo, DMN. Go and ga, the closest remaining knight to Ryuji struck him in the side with the butt of its sword, the wind instantly leaving Ryuji. Ha! Looks like your little burst of energy was for nothing, Sakamoto, Kamoshida taunted, grinning darkly down at the blonde. Your friend here seems like a real coward. I'm surprised that he didn't try and dash. The knight that had struck Ryuji suddenly fell forward. In the moment that Ryuji had been struck, none had noticed that Izuku had already moved. He hadn't given it any thought at all, and if anyone were to ask him right now, Izuku would have told them that his body had moved on its own. The green-haired teen had hoisted one of the barrels over his head and smashed it into the back of the knight that had struck Ryuji. Tears threatened at the edge of Izuku's eyes, but he gritted his teeth, spinning around and using his momentum to catch the final knight in the cell off guard and pinning it against the far wall, tripping it over the benches. Hey! What do you think you're doing? Ryuji cried out in shock, eyes wide as he watched the skittish kid's attempts to save him. Jigo, Sakamoto-senpai. Use what speed you have left, Izuku cried out, eyes tightly clenched in fear. Hurry, before it's too late. Midoriya. Ryuji muttered in complete awe. He never would have expected that the fidgety junior would have come back for him. Why, you idiot. I'm supposed to be the one saving you. In reality, he was actually quite touched by Izuku's sudden burst of bravery. Ryuji pushed himself off the ground and got to his feet, hoping he could make an opening for Izuku to escape with him. That was until he felt something slimy wrap around his neck and choke him. With surprising force, Ryuji was hurled to the farthest wall, knocking the wind out of him once again. Sakamoto-senpai. Izuku cried out in fear, but was quickly silenced as the knight he had pinned slammed the grip of its sword into his back, painfully knocking him flat on the ground. It was Kamoshida who had caught him off guard, the perverted teacher cackling as he withdrew his elongated tongue. Well, that sure was a surprise. Who would have thought that the random brat would have some guts? You shouldn't have bothered making friends with Sakamoto, though. He's only thinks about his own selfish desires rather than the needs of those around him. Izuku could barely muster up the strength to get off the ground, but the pain he felt did nothing to stop him. Why, you're wrong. He managed to say, his eyes ablaze with determination as they drifted back towards Kamoshida. He went out of his way, to try and save me, even though we just met, even though he knew he might die. Midoriya. Ryuji couldn't believe what he was hearing from his junior. But Ryuji's awe was cut short as Kamoshida fumed at Izuku's continued defiance. What was this brat thinking? Why didn't he know his place? Trash like you is what inspires Drabble to stand up against my authority in the first place. I've changed my mind. Guards. Grab the green-haired one first. If he's so ready to give up his life for Sakamoto, then let him be first. Yubstrd. Ryuji cried out in anger, only for one of the knights that had regained its balance to pin him against the wall with its shield. Izuku felt a metal boot kick him in the side, spit leaving his mouth as he tumbled across the ground. The knight he had previously pinned then grabbed him by the collar and threw him against the wall littered with chains. You can just add it to the list of things you screwed someone else out of, Sakamoto. Kamoshida cackled darkly, a devilish grin spreading across his face as he turned back to Izuku. The green-haired teen's breathing was shallow and laborious. Sweat poured down his face as two knights pinned him against the wall. He could only watch helplessly as a third advanced with its sword aimed at his heart. I can't escape. There's nowhere for me to go or run to. Izuku thought in panic, tears starting to trail down his cheeks as fear overtook him. I am gonna die here, why? Why has the world been so cruel? Truly, this is an unjust game. Your chances of victory are almost none. Izuku's sobs stopped as he heard a young, feminine voice whisper to him. He glanced up as a faint blue light hovered overhead. It was a butterfly, its silvery blue wings glittering as it fluttered by. But if my voice is reaching you, then perhaps your fate may be changed. What is that? What was? Come on, kid. You gon' give up that easily. A new voice began to echo in his head. Unlike the previous one, this one was distinctly deep and masculine, almost reminding Izuku of All Might. Yet, some part of it managed to remind him of his own. What? You proved your resolve when you jumped to save the blonde. Even now, I can feel that you never regretted your choice in saving that woman either. Actin' and doin' right without thinkin', that's what it means to be a hero, right? And yet, society's tellin' you that you're a criminal. A piece of scum for having the guts to do right by your fellow man. What do you think? Do you really want to be a hero? Or was that all just some act? Would you take back what you did? Would you? The voice boomed in Izuku's head, causing him to grit his teeth and tears of frustration rather than fear began rolling down his face. Would I take back what I did? Images of that woman struggling against the man filtered through his head, and in an instant, Izuku knew his answer, eyes snapping open with a heavy glare. No. As she called for help. There was no way I would ever ignore that. Not then, and not now. The voice in his mind grew louder than a howitzer cannon as it burst into hearty laughter. Izuku soon felt as though someone were trying to split his head in half with a rusted axe. He released a cry of agony as he doubled over and thrashed against his restraints, sweat cascading down his forehead in buckets. The pain only intensified with time. It wasn't long until it felt like his head was going to explode from the pressure building within it. Well said, my boy. We are in agreement. Now. Then, let's seal our contract with a vow. I am thou, thou art I. I shall grant you the power to enact justice on this world. Ha! Has the peasant gone mad from fear? Kamoshida taunted with a smirk, merely shaking his head at Izuku's strange display. Don't worry, peasant. It will all be over soon. Execute him. The knight at the front complied, raising its blade to strike. Izuku's body then went lax, his eyes falling shut as the pain subsided as quickly as it came. Never regret. Never surrender. Never doubt. If society chains you down for being a hero, then rip those chains off and save them, whether they want you to or not. I understand, thank you. Izuku murmured. Before the knight's blade could reach the prisoner's neck, a gale of wind erupted around Izuku as his eyes snapped open, causing both the guards and Kamoshida to flinch and take a step back. The two that were holding Izuku against the wall recoiled in confusion, releasing their iron grips on him. When the wind subsided, Kamoshida gazed back up at the green-haired teen, who now wore a strange mask on his face. It was bone-white except for the black lines that extended from the eye holes and covered the top half of Izuku's face. Two horn-like pieces protruded from opposite corners of the mask's upper rim and curved towards each other slightly. Reaching up to his face, the Izuku touched the mask curiously. What is this? Pull it off. Izuku didn't hesitate or bother question the strange order, immediately gripping the edges of the mask and tugging at them as strong as he could. He began to scream once more as the mask seemed to pull at the skin of his face, ripping it away in pieces as he tugged. But Izuku could not and would not stop until he finally tore the mask from his brow with a final howl of pain. With bated breath, Izuku let the blood drip down his face, glaring furiously as he looked up at Kamoshida. Without another motion or word, Izuku flashed the darkest grin he'd ever given in his life. Suddenly the blood that covered the top of his head evaporated into blue flame, the fire expanding into a surging torrent that enveloped his body as dark chains began to rise into the air all around him. What? Kamoshida cried out in shock. Ryuji could only stare wide-eyed from the wall, jaw slackening as he watched the scene unfold before him. His junior's eyes, once a forest green, had turned the color of molten gold as they peered out through the flames. The fire was then converted into blinding light, forcing everyone present to shield their eyes. A silhouette began to rise up from Izuku's body, standing above him like some sort of guardian angel. Its features slowly came into view as the light faded away, revealing a human-like figure with a solid white body that looked as though it was sculpted from porcelain. It wore a leathery kilt dyed red with matching thigh-high combat boots. Draped on its back was a flowing red cape that seemed to billow in the wind produced by its arrival. Its body was muscular, though more defined and toned rather than hulking and bulbous, with six-pack abs carved deeply into its torso. Its hairstyle was unkempt, much like Izuku's, but instead of a green rat's nest its hair was composed of nothing but crimson flames. Its eyes lacked pupils and irises and its expression was blank, save for a solid smirk at the edge of its mouth. A scimitar was fastened against its hip. Around its neck hung two medals, one in the shape of a diamond crest, and the other in the shape of All Might's head. What the hell? Ryuji muttered out in pure confusion. He looked down at Izuku, only to see that his junior had also transformed. The black blazer and plaid trousers indicative of Shujin had vanished. In their place was a full-body black jumpsuit, red detailing running down the sides of the torso and legs and forming boxes on either side of its midsection. Black elbow and knee pads protected his joints while matching red gloves covered his hands. Over the jumpsuit, Izuku wore a dark LTHR trench coat that reached down to his thighs. On his neck hung a steel mouthguard of sorts with a wide, toothy smile etched into the metal. Gone was the skittish, jumpy teen that Ryuji saw only moments before. Now there stood Izuku brimming with confidence and a smile that would give the number one hero a run for his money. The being above Izuku flexed its muscles and threw heavy forearm strikes at the two knights surrounding Izuku, easily knocking them on the ground before launching a punch at the guard who would be his executioner, sending it careening into the wall of the cell. From the sea of your soul, I come forth. The figure above Izuku boomed, the green-haired teen glancing up at the figure in a bit of wonder and amazement of his own. I am the rebel hero of your soul, your power to save others in this foreign land. I am Carter. With a flourish of his cape, the white light finally faded completely, allowing those around to get a clearer view of the being above Izuku. If you ask, I will give you the power to break forth and save yourself from this mess. Please give me the power I need. Carter. Izuku accepted with great determination, eyes shining with a resolve he'd never felt before. With another round of booming laughter, Carter nodded in acceptance. Then consider it done, kid. Let's show them that you can be a hero. I ain't ever seen a quirk like that. Ryuji sputter out in shock and awe. What the hell is all this? Kamoshida snapped in confusion and fear, taking a step back glaring at Izuku furiously. Who the hell are you? He gazed around at his knights to see that they were still capable of moving. The king clicked his tongue in frustration. Gee, get up. Get up right now and kill him. The masks on two of the knights' helmets burst off, a black ooze pouring out of the opening and dripping to the ground before taking the form of specters that floated above the ground. Their heads contorted themselves until they looked much like jack-o'-lanterns with witch hats sitting on top, a single hand sticking out and holding a glass lantern. Call out my powers, boy. Release that energy you got stored up. Carter instructed Izuku, the green-haired teen turning to the newly formed enemies with a fierce glare. Izuku didn't exactly understand at first, but the word rolled off the tongue when he spoke before he put any thought into it. Koha. A ball of light formed in Carter's hand, the powerful being pitching it forth like a baseball and hitting one of the pumpkin-headed enemies dead on. The jack-o'-lantern seemed to take massive damage, crying out in pain and sailing into the cell door. The other one seemed undeterred, flying forward and hoping to strike Izuku with its own head. Now, kid. Swing your staff and show it what for. Carter advised once more. This one gave Izuku pause, unsure what the being above him referred to. My staff. Izuku muttered before looking down at his hand. True to Carter's word, the quirkless hero was grasping a wooden staff in one hand. He wasn't sure where it came from or why he was holding it, but he had little time to dwell on it. He quickly hoisted it up, blocking the attack from the monster. Although he skidded back a meter, Izuku held strong. Moving on instinct, Izuku spun the staff in hand and retaliated with two swift strikes on either side of the monster's head before spinning around to nail it with a rolling smash, knocking the monster onto the ground. Izuku had taken some combat classes when he was training for the UA entrance exam, but he had only learned the basics. His body seemed to know what it wanted to do and fought as if it had done so for years. Congrats, kid. This power is now yours to use. Finish them off as you want. Carter boomed again, pointing at the two staggered monsters. If they had been human, Izuku would have hesitated to destroy them. But seeing that these monsters were unnatural and actively trying to kill him, he felt no such restraint. Carter. Unleash your light. White light filled both of Carter's palms, the figure hurling its energy forth with a double swing and destroying the pumpkin-headed monsters in a brilliant explosion, their bodies dissipating into thin air. With a deep sigh of relief, Izuku felt some of the tension leave his shoulders before he turned to Kamoshida with a heated gaze, eyes narrowed dangerously. Holy SHT, man. Ryuji finally found his voice, clambering to his feet as he stared at Izuku with wide eyes. What the hell was all that? Izuku blinked for a moment as the adrenaline rush faded, his usual demeanor returning to him. I actually Dawn Dash. You little brat. Kamoshida growled, approaching Izuku carefully. The green-haired teen narrowed his eyes and spun the staff in his hands, preparing to strike out at the supposed king. Before he could do that though, Ryuji acted first, tackling the half-naked teacher with his shoulder. You like that, but? Ryuji laughed with a bit of satisfaction. Izuku saw keys drop from the teacher after being hit, using his staff to bounce them up in the air and grab them. Sakamoto-senpai. Let's get out of here. Izuku ushered, the blonde quickly nodding in agreement. The two dashed out of the cell, slamming the door shut behind them. Izuku tossed Ryuji the keys, who immediately locked the door. You DMN brats. You'll pay for this. Kamoshida growled as he beat his fists against the bars. Izuku and Ryuji only regarded him for a moment longer before breathing another sigh of relief, the two leaning forward on their knees. They were finally out of immediate danger, thanks to Izuku. Man, all of this SHT is so DMN nuts. Ryuji muttered, glancing at his junior. In a flash of blue flame, Izuku's costume dissipated and returned to his school clothes. What the hell? What was all that? I don't really know. Izuku replied, standing up straight and looking at his hands. But I wanted to fight back, and all of that suddenly happened. Ryuji bit his bottom lip, wanting to ask more questions that he likely wouldn't get an answer to. You bastards. You'll never escape. Kamoshida barked again, causing them to jump in surprise. God, this but still won't shut up. Ryuji snapped in annoyance before looking at Izuku. Let's just get the hell out of here. You lead the way. Gee, got it. Stay close, so we don't get separated. Izuku nodded in agreement, running down the cell block. Ryuji only took a moment to toss the keys away. With a moment to breathe, Izuku scanned the dungeon. It really was something out of a movie set. Several other cells lined the path. A small river of water ran through the center of the room, leading to a platform area similar to what they were already standing on. Ahead of them, their path was blocked by a great wall of iron bars, the door on their side of the moat tightly shut. Izuku easily spotted the open door on the opposite side, waving for Ryuji to follow. Sakamoto-senpai. This way. We can jump across. Got it. Ryuji nodded, quickly following after Izuku. The moment Izuku started to run though, he realized that he was almost completely drained of energy. He grit his teeth in pain, pushing through the exhaustion. We need to get out of here, first, can't let the exhaustion bother me. Izuku told himself. Once they approached the steel blockade, Izuku made a quick turn to a broken bridge. It still had a bit of the bridge left, enough for anyone to jump across. Izuku took a running jump over, landing safely on the other side but stumbling forward. His body clearly didn't appreciate the sudden exertion. Hey. Careful, man. Ryuji called out as he landed on the other side and helped to catch Izuku before he could fall flat on his face. The green-haired teen panted for air, the adrenaline from the previous fight had faded completely. Sorry, Sakamoto-senpai. I'm pretty tired after all that. He forced himself to stand upright and took deep breaths. But don't worry, I can keep going. I'll make sure we get out of here safe. Ryuji didn't answer immediately, but his eyes hid little of his admiration. Dude, you're friggin' amazing. You saved us back there and everything, and you're still going even though you're dead tired. I know, I can tell since I ran track, he pointed out before giving a kind smile. You look like a real hero. Izuku stopped, opening his mouth as if to say something before feeling a river of tears explode from his eyes, which immediately made Ryuji recoil. Why you really think so? Before he could get ahead of himself, Izuku quickly shook his head, returning his focus to the situation at hand. Sorry, got carried away with my emotions, we should get going before more guards arrive. Ryuji scratched the back of his head, releasing a strained chuckle. I really can't make heads or tails of your personality. He reached forward and snatched Izuku's bag off his shoulder. I'll carry this for you since you're pretty worn out as is. We're gonna need ya if we're gonna break out. Alright, thank you for that. Izuku nodded, immediately feeling the relief as he turned back to their path and leading them forward. This way. They jogged down the path, Izuku being careful to keep his stamina in check and Ryuji sticking close enough in case he needed to keep his junior from falling. They entered another corridor of the dungeon similar to the one they were previously in, but the gated exits were both closed as far as they could tell. DMN. What now? Ryuji growled, eyes darting around for an exit somewhere. Izuku did the same, his eyes soon falling on an open cell right next to the gated wall. On the floor, there was a noticeable hole on the edge, one that a person could slip through. Through here. Izuku ran inside the cell and dropped on all fours. As he expected, there was a tunnel inside the hole, one that went past the exit. We can crawl through this hole. Got it. Careful as you go. Ryuji advised, waiting for Izuku to go through before soon following after him. The tunnel wasn't a long one, the two coming out moments later in another cell that thankfully the door was open to. Alright, let's go. Yeah. Izuku nodded, rushing out and gazing around the dungeon again. This room was a bit different, as over the stream there was actually a full-length drawbridge. What the hell? What is this place, man? Ryuji huffed, but didn't bother standing around questioning it further. The two quickly jogged across the bridge, having seen an exit at the front left corner of the room. As they steadily approached the exit, they both heard movement from their right across the way. Get down! Ryuji whisper shouted, the two diving behind a stack of barrels that was just out of sight. Peering their heads out ever so slightly, they could see several knights on the other side marching along the path, thankfully not crossing the bridge and entering the next area. They're looking for us, huh? We can't waste time here, Sakamoto-senpai, we should get going, Izuku whispered back, touching his shoulder and motioning his head to the exit path. With a nod, Ryuji and Izuku stood up and took off down the path that soon led to a winding staircase. It's going up, think this'll lead us out of here? Ryuji asked aloud as they started to jog up the stairs. As if his previous exhaustion wasn't enough, Izuku could feel his lungs tightening the higher they climbed. He didn't answer Ryuji's question either, both because he was winded and also because he didn't want to get his hopes up. Considering the size of the castle they've seen already, he doubted this would be a quick escape. Once they reached the top, the two escapees came across a wooden door, Ryuji immediately pushing it open in hope that his previous suggestion was right. Much to Izuku's chagrin, it was his own hypothesis that proved to be true. There was still a bit of dungeon left before the two could reach the outside. Oh, you've gotta be shitting me. There's more. Ryuji cursed in annoyance, looking around to find that they were in a fairly similar area from before. Just what the hell is up with this place? It's no use trying to figure out what's going on, Sakamoto-senpai. Even if we tried looking around, I doubt we'd get any real answers. Izuku admitted, taking several steps forward along the stone path. Come on, let's keep moving before they catch up. G got it. You're probably right. Ryuji accepted, following after the shorter teen. They continued along the path until they came upon another part of the dungeon, but this time something noticeable hung from the middle of the room. Holy SHT. TH those are. Izuku muttered, eyes widening in horror. Several students were being held in cages hanging from the ceiling over the river, their heads covered in iron masks. The green-haired teen bit his lip, glancing at Ryuji for a moment before stepping forward. Hey. What do you think you're doing? Ryuji quickly grabbed Izuku, pulling him back from the edge of the river. Somebody has to help them. We have to let them out, somehow. Izuku argued, glancing up at Ryuji in desperation. I have enough energy. Maybe if I reach out with Carter, I can dash. Dude, you're drained as is. Plus it'll be dangerous trying to pull all those people in. Ryuji snapped, shaking his head. You've gotta let them stay. If they were on the way, maybe, but they'll take too long to get out and we don't know what kind of condition they're in. Izuku bit his lip, knowing everything that Ryuji was saying was right. Had he thought about it for a moment, he would have easily come to the same conclusion. But as usual, he almost acted without thinking to try and save them. Why yeah, but we have to do something for them. Once we get out of here, we'll get a hold of the cops or some heroes, maybe. They can break into a shitty place like this easily and save everyone. Ryuji reassured. It was the logical decision. Their own safety was the priority, after all. But here, after seeing these bizarre monsters in a strange castle where Shujin Academy should be, what was logical anymore? Izuku shook his head to clear his mind as he reluctantly agreed. Okay, there's a drawbridge ahead. Let's go and see if we can get it to lower. You got it, Ryuji replied as the two were finally able to move on. Izuku spared a glance back at the suspended prisoners, but hardened his resolve. Right now, those prisoners weren't in immediate danger. He had to get someone who could save them, instead. The hell? There's no SWCH on this DMN thing. Ryuji cursed, Izuku turning his attention back to his senior. How the hell are we gonna get across? Wait a sec, senpai. Izuku called out, jogging up to the bridge now. Something that stuck out was a stone bust in the shape of Kamoshida, its eyes shining yellow with an ugly grin. The chain leading to the drawbridge was sticking out from the top of it. Guessing from the kind of personality that man has, would say the SWCH would be somewhere on here. Izuku ran his hands across the stone for some kind of slot or SWCH. When he touched the jaw, he noticed that it gave a little after some pressure, which led him to pull down. As expected, the drawbridge lowered for the two teens, the blonde punk widening his eyes in shock. Just as I thought. This Kamoshida is incredibly self-absorbed. Holy CRP, that was amazing. You're pretty DMN smart, man. Ryuji complimented with a grin, Izuku immediately blushing up and rubbing the back of his head. And no, it was nothing, really. Man, but seriously, for it to be something like that, Kamoshida is as full of himself as ever, BSTRD. Ryuji snapped in annoyance before turning back to the bridge. Come on, let's go. Hey, wait you two. A young voice cried out. Izuku and Ryuji paused before they could cross the bridge, glancing around in question after hearing the new voice. Behind you. They quickly turned around, now looking at one of the cells. Within it, a creature about 2 feet tall clung to the bars. The majority of its body was black, with short, stubby limbs and a head as large as its entire torso. It had a white fur on the bottom half of its round face with strangely large oval eyes and wore a yellow scarf around its neck. On top of its head were unmistakable cat ears. Do you think you can let me out? There was a lone girl who sat in the library during lunch. Unlike most students, she spent her free time going through her notes and materials instead of socializing and relaxing. This wasn't because she was falling behind or had a test coming up. She was simply trying to keep her mind sharp and ready for what exams may come in the future. Her goal was to enter a prestigious college, and to do that, she had to be on top of her academics. She was a third-year student and the student council president. Her black and red plaid skirt tee went halfway down her thighs and she wore black leggings underneath it. In place of the school blazer, she wore a black vest over the required turtleneck. She had straight brunette hair that went to the nape of her neck, accessorized with a braided hairband that could be easily mistaken for part of her hair. Her complexion was fair and her eyes were a piercing red. This is Makoto Najima. Did you hear about the transfer student we're supposed to get today? Makoto could hear a girl whisper from a table down. She wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but the chatter had interrupted her train of thought. She wanted to tell her to quiet down, but realized that it would have been rude. They were at least whispering among themselves. Oh, yeah, I did. A first year, right? Doesn't he have a record or something? This brought her some pause, but she immediately shook her head, deciding to focus on her work. It had nothing to do with her, after all. Yeah, that's right. He must have some crazy scary quirk. Normally it's pretty strong to get an assault charge nowadays. The first girl hummed quietly. That's the scary part. Apparently he doesn't even have a quirk, the other one pointed out, her friend gasping in surprise. Today was supposed to be his first day, too, but apparently he didn't even show up for class. He certainly isn't helping his case if he's doing that. He looked pretty plain on the criminal record of him online, though. Criminal record? How did they get a hold of that? Makoto found herself wondering, but she shook her head again and tried to clear her thoughts. She didn't have time for gossip. To think that the newest transfer student had a criminal record. She was surprised that the principal would accept such a student. And he was quirkless. What kind of boy could they have accepted? I can't remember his name, but I remember what he looks like. I think he had big, poofy curly hair that was kinda dark green, and freckles on his cheeks. Wait. What? That. I think it started with an M. Izukumidoriya. Midoriya. Izukumidoriya. Makoto found herself speaking up, slowly setting her pencil down. She looked up at the girls finally, her eyes shining with curiosity and worry. Was that his name? Oh, yeah. That was it. The first girl chirped, I'm surprised you knew, Najima-senpai. Did you see his criminal record, too? And no, I haven't. Where can I find it? Makoto asked, walking over to the table with surprising energy. It was leaked to Twitter by some anonymous kid from our school, I think. Here. The second girl informed, pulling out her phone and scrolling through the page. She held up the phone and allowed Makoto to take it, who took it gingerly and looked at the file. On the page was Izuku's unmistakable face. His mugshot showed him to be on the verge of tears. The file also listed his crime and several of his personal details. Makoto's hand slightly shook as she held the phone, but she did well to mask her discomfort. She slowly handed the phone back to the girl and offered a curt smile. Thank you for showing me, and I apologize for eavesdropping on your conversation. Don't worry about it, Prez. It's probably best you know out of all the students anyway. Who knows what the kid is capable of, right? The girl smiled back with a nod. Right, well then, I'll get going. Thank you both for that information. Makoto bowed in appreciation before returning to her books. She couldn't study, not now. She immediately packed away her pencils and notepads and stuffed them away into her school bag before turning around to leave. I wanted to see him and bakugou someday, but I never would have imagined like this. What happened to you, Midori? Izuku and Ryuji stared for a long moment at the strange creature, unsure what exactly they were looking at. Ryuji was the first to speak up, though he could only tilt his head in question. You're a cat, monster, thing. Sakamoto-senpai, that's probably his quirk. Izuku argued, turning to the cat before humming in thought. Although, even those with cat-like appearances don't usually remain so small, your head's rather large in comparison to your body, too. It's almost like you're some kind of mascot. What? No way. I've never seen a quirk that makes someone look like this before, Ryuji argued, scratching the top of his head in thought. It's not that far-fetched, to be honest. Have you ever seen images of the principal of UA? Izuku reasoned, turning to Ryuji fully. He's actually a mouse type. I think. The principal of oh yeah. Ryuji hummed in realization. That's right. I saw him on TV a couple of times. Usually for the sports festival, I think. Exactly. It could be something similar to that for him, as well, Izuku declared with a satisfied nod, glancing at Morgana with more understanding. I'm glad we cleared that up. Hey. Are you both making fun of me? The cat thing snapped in irritation, I'm not a cat. Nor is this my quirk. I think. The cat thing said, though his last words were more subdued. You think? The hell is that supposed to mean? Ryuji spat, raising a brow before shaking his head. Wait, who cares? Let's just leave him. If it's not his quirk, then he might be one of those creepy but guard things. Sakamoto-senpai. I can't do that. Izuku immediately went over to the SWCH. It doesn't seem like the others, and it was also locked up here. I don't think we have to worry about him being our enemy. See? This guy gets it. The cat monster turned to Izuku with a smug grin. You seem pretty sharp. You even caught on to the SWCH all on your own. Come on, Midoriya. We don't. Ryuji grumbled, against the idea. Breathing a sigh of exasperation, Ryuji finally conceded. Yeah, okay, fine. My bad. At least we're able to help someone while we're here. Tell you what. I'll sweeten the deal. For letting me out, I'll guide you two out of this joint, the cat declared, immediately drawing their attention back to him. That should be enough compensation for releasing me, right? Seriously? Ryuji muttered. Before anyone could add further to the conversation, the sound of metal footfall could be heard in the distance, drawing the attention of the three back to the way Izuku and Ryuji came in. Screw it, you got a deal. We were gonna let you out, anyways. Izuku gave a kind smile and opened the door for the cat creature, pulling a SWCH just to the left of the cell. The door swung open, the monster skipping out and stretching its body. Feels so good to be free again. Hey, cat. We don't have time to mess around, so hurry up and lead the way. Ryuji snapped impatiently, earning a glare from the small creature. I'm not a cat. The name's Morgana, and don't you forget it. It identified itself indignantly. Besides, weren't you two both just wasting time arguing over what I was? Whatever, just hurry up and lead us out of here. Ryuji disregarded. Before Morgana could retort, Izuku decided to step in, holding his hands up to ease them both. See, come on, guys. We've got to focus on escaping, there's no reason to keep fighting. He turned back to Morgana with hopeful eyes. Now please, Morgana-san, lead us out of here. Well, at least one of you can keep a level head, Morgana snickered, rubbing its paw under his nose. Alright then, you two. Stay close and follow me. Across this bridge, hurry. The cat didn't have to tell them twice, the two following after Morgana without hesitation as he ran across the bridge. For something that small with such tiny legs, Morgana was surprisingly fast, easily outpacing the teenagers despite their own desperate sprint forward. As the three crossed the bridge, they walked right into an enemy knight, Ryuji skidding his feet on the ground as he came to a stop. "Ah, SHT, an enemy!" he cried out in shock. Morgana didn't seem deterred, taking a position in front of the two with a cocky smirk on his mascot-like face. "Such an amateur. Watch and learn," the cat declared before glancing at Izuku. The green-haired teen's clothes had transformed the moment they encountered the knight, Izuku only further confused by what was going on with his strange new powers. "Hey, it looks like you can fight. Help me out." What? Izuku blinked in surprise for a moment before quickly catching on, nodding in acceptance. Alright, I'll do what I can." "Good, then. Now come, Zoro," Morgana proclaimed. A flash of blue flame suddenly erupted around his body, causing Ryuji and Izuku to cover their eyes in shock. A figure clad in black rose from the feline creature's body. Its massive torso looked far too unwieldy for its spindly legs to support. It wore a Spanish black suit and had a round, flat head with cat-like eyes and an absurdly long, pointed mustache that went past either side of its head. It held a rapier between its thumb and index finger that looked too small to be of any use considering its girth, which it brandished in a Z pattern in the air before pointing the sword at the opposing knights. "So you have one too, then?" Izuku muttered in shock, eyes gazing up at the large being hovering above Morgana. "Why does the friggin' cat have one too?" Ryuji blurted out in shock. "Hey, eyes forward. Focus on our enemies," Morgana ordered, Izuku blinking after a moment before quickly snapping his attention forward toward the guards. Like before, they shed their armor, forming a black ooze before rising from it. Like before, a pumpkin-headed monster appeared, but this time its companion was different. It was an impish creature with large beady eyes and a slender body. On its crotch, a large horn stuck out past its knees. If their lives weren't in danger, Izuku might have made a comment about how strange it looked. "Ah, dude, is that thing its dong?" Apparently Ryuji felt more inclined to make the first comment on it. "Who cares, we're in the middle of a fight." Morgana groaned in irritation, pulling out a scimitar from nowhere. Just like before, Izuku found a staff in his hands. "Anyways, get ready. They're intercepting us and blocking our exit. We're going to have to fight our way through. You understood?" Izuku nodded in acceptance, reaching up and pulling the mask from his face, summoning Carter above him. To his relief, the action of removing the mask was no longer painful nor did it cause him to bleed. "Carter, shine down," the mumbling teen ordered, the large being forming a ball of light in his palm before pitching it like a fastball. The jack-o'-lantern monster recoiled in pain, but withstood the attack, hissing in anger as it darted forward. "Heh, you're a beginner, all right. Let me show you how it's done," Morgana scoffed, jumping forward. "Come forth, my other self." Zoro twirled its blade in a Z shape and unleashing a strong gust of wind. This hit the pumpkin monster dead on and, unlike before, knocked the monster off its non-existent feet, its body hitting the ground with a thud as it seemed dazed. It seemed more effective than my attack. Was it that much more powerful? Izuku inquired aloud, eyes trained on the fallen monster. "Not quite. Most shadows usually have a weakness you can exploit. That one was weak to wind. They all have different weaknesses, though, so it's up to you to find them," Morgana explained, watching the impish monster carefully. It was keeping its distance, having realized that it was likely going to have to charge in alone now that its pumpkin-headed ally was incapacitated. This is a basic thing to know when fighting shadows, so remember it well. "Shadows?" Midoriya repeated, looking back up at the monsters. "So that's what they're called. Watch out, that one's coming in for an attack," Morgana warned, pulling Izuku from his thoughts. He raised his staff in hopes of blocking the imp's assault, but he missed the timing, allowing the imp to rake its claws across his chest. Izuku grit his teeth in pain as he touched his wound gingerly, feeling where the material of his attire had been ripped open. DDMN it hits pretty strong. Don't worry, I've got you covered. Morgana announced, summoning Zoro once again. Jia. With a quick flourish of its sword, the towering being cast something that surrounded Izuku in a green light, his wound and clothes mending themselves until it looked like he was never injured at all. Whoa, I'm all healed. Izuku muttered in shock. Not even Recovery Girl's quirk worked that fast. He didn't have time to dwell on it, as the imp came back for another slash. Izuku made sure to dodge this time, quickly sidestepping the monster. His teeth clenched as adrenaline began to surge through his veins. Izuku summoned his courage and swung his staff, slamming the monster in the side of the head. It knocked the shadow back a few meters, but it wasn't down for the count. Izuku didn't bother to wait and see if it would retort, quickly summoning Carter and pointing forward. Koha. Another ball of light flew forward, knocking the imp to the ground. Great hit. Now, let's finish him off. Morgana ordered again. With a single nod in agreement, Izuku followed the cat's lead, both summoning their other selves and hurling their powers towards their respective targets. With a wail of pain, both the imp and the jack-o'-lantern burst into thin air, the final blow from their attacks finishing them off. With their enemy destroyed, Morgana turned to Izuku, flashing a large grin on his round head. Not bad for a newbie, I'll give you that. Your persona is pretty strong, too. Izuku was breathing heavily, wiping the sweat from his brow on his sleeve before turning to Morgana with a small grin of his own. Thanks, B, but I am feeling pretty tired. Izuku admitted, leaning forward on his knees before placing his thumb and index finger over his mouth in thought. B, but still, it's interesting to learn that these shadows all have certain weaknesses. In future combat situations, it would be best to look for these first before using physical attacks, that way we can finish them off much faster. The problem is that it doesn't look like we have a lot of different attributes at our disposal. It would be wise to determine how many attributes there are. Izuku continued to mutter to himself as Ryuji and Morgana looked on in confusion. Does he always do this? Morgana asked, tilting his head over to look at Ryuji. Well, I mean I just met him, but he did do something like this a bit earlier. Ryuji said, kicking the ground awkwardly. Hey, dude. You're doing that mumbly thing again. Huh? Izuku finally stopped as he turned back to his companions, blushing in embarrassment as he realized what he was doing. Sorry about that. I got really lost in thought. Clearing his throat, Izuku stood straight and turned to Morgana. So, these powers we have, they're called personas? You mean those big-ass monsters that come out of you all dramatic-like? Ryuji asked this time, walking up and joining the two now that the threat was dealt with. That's right. They are what is called a persona. Morgana nodded in confirmation. Notice how he tore off his mask when he summoned it. You see, everyone has a mask within their heart that they wear to protect them. Morgan began to explain. Before he could finish, a flash of blue flames surrounded Izuku once again, changing his clothes back to normal. What? I'm back to normal. Izuku muttered, glancing down at his attire that had returned to his school clothes. Weird. It looks like you don't have full control over your powers, yet. Morgana hummed in thought, tilting his head in wonder. Normally your clothes wouldn't shift like that dash. Hey, can we save this for later? It's confusing as hell and I really don't get any of it. Ryuji grumbled, the cat turning to him in annoyance. Can't you just sit still and listen for a second? You're the one asking all of these questions. Morgana huffed, shaking his head before looking down the path. On second thought, let's just get going. We don't have time to be standing around talking, anyways. The guards will find us if we stay. Why, you're right. We need to leave as quickly as possible. Izuku agreed, glancing back at the cages that hung over the river. Once we get out, we'll be able to help these people. Help these people? Morgana repeated, raising a brow at the green-haired teen. You need to be focused more on saving yourselves than anyone else, curly hair. Not that these people matter, anyway. Now come on. Morgana ordered, dashing off ahead of them and causing them both to blink. Hey. Don't just say something so cynical then start running off. Ryuji snapped in annoyance, taking off after the cat alongside Izuku. Just because you wanna save yourself doesn't mean you gotta be heartless. He's right. There's no way we can leave these people just to be tortured. That's terrible. Izuku agreed, shouting after Morgana as he ran. Ugh, you guys just don't get it. I'm not saying it because I'm being heartless. Morgana came to a halt after stopping at the top of the stairs, widening his eyes and smiling. We're almost out, just across this bridge. Morgana told them, Izuku and Ryuji quickly joining him at the top. While the drawbridge was raised, there was another Kamoshida statue nearby, the SWCH likely in the same place. Well, at least we're almost out of this shitshow. Ryuji sighed in relief, walking forward after Morgana. Izuku merely nodded, but what Morgana had told them continued to rub Izuku the wrong way. How could they just leave all of these people behind to be tortured? It didn't make any sense. Morgana didn't seem like the type of person to be so callous, but again, they had only just met. Still, he couldn't help but be bothered by the statement. Hey look, over here. Izuku was pulled from his thoughts, looking up to see Ryuji standing in front of one of the cages. Jogging over to join him, Izuku widened his eyes to see another teen lying on the ground, wearing a PE outfit from what Izuku could tell. Who is this guy? He looks familiar but... Ryuji groaned in irritation, scratching his head. DMN, I'm too nervous. I can't think straight. Hey, I told you guys already, didn't I? These people don't matter. Morgana reminded them, Izuku raising a brow in question. Look, there's no enough time to explain. We need to dash. Before he could say anything further, the bridge seemed to lower on its own. Shuffling across came another soul guard, quickly causing the cat to groan. DMN, I told you both to listen. We'll just fight like before. Izuku stated firmly, his previous outfit returning to him once again. Huh. You know, for a stuttery guy, you're pretty brave, huh? Morgana turned to the shadow and smirking. I like that. It quickly dissolved into a black mess, this time summoning forth a different creature. It was a small woman with pixie wings, wearing a blue one-piece with matching gloves and boots. Like with the previous one, two had spawned from the armor. Carter. Izuku called out as he ripped the mask off, the persona materializing into existence. It seemed to understand Izuku's intent, flying forward and slamming its fist into the fairy and knocking it down. Nice, you landed a solid hit. Morgana grinned before turning to the other shadow. Zoro, show your might. The cat's persona appeared, unleashing a torrent of wind once again on the other. The fairy took damage, but didn't fall like those before it. Instead, it flew forward and attacked Morgana. Too slow. Morgana taunted as he jumped over its feeble assault. As he came back down from the air, Morgana slashed at it with his scimitar, finishing off the pixie with a slash and dispersing it into black ooze, like before. Izuku jumped forward with his staff, slamming it down on the creature he had knocked off its feet and causing it to disperse. With a deep breath, Izuku started to relax, dismissing Carter and watching as the blue flames dismissed his clothes again. Standing up straight, Izuku rolled his shoulders, feeling his stamina slowly draining from all the fighting, but still capable of continuing on. Not bad, curly hair. Not bad at all. Morgana chuckled, zipping up to Izuku and placing his paws on his hips. You certainly don't look much like a fighter, but you've definitely got backbone. Hey, guys. Help me get this guy. I think we can at least carry him out. Ryuji called out, turning their attention to him. The blonde was getting ready to open the cage, only for Morgana to groan. Will you pay attention? You can't worry about others right now, and you shouldn't anyway. I don't have time to explain why, but that guy and no one else here matters. Morgana snapped in annoyance, jumping to the front of the bridge to get ready to leave. Then please, tell me why he doesn't matter, shouted Izuku, causing Morgana to blink. If you can at least make me understand, then I'll listen. If you won't and can't wait, then take Sakamoto-senpai ahead with you and I'll stay back and help carry him out. Wait, what? Are you crazy? Morgana blanched in shock, jaw dropping as he watched Izuku join Ryuji at the cell. I can fight Sakamoto-senpai, so you can leave with Morgana-san if you want. Izuku pointed out. Dude. Ryuji muttered, his amazement of Izuku only rising. With a large grin, Ryuji shook his head. Nah, man. You've got me all fired up. I'll carry him for you and you can cover our backs. The cat can leave if he wants. They both turned to Morgana, who only stared at them both in disbelief. You chivalrous morons, DMN. Morgana snapped in annoyance. In truth, he was actually a bit impressed by their resolve, but that didn't change a single fact, that guy is nothing like either of you. He's not real. Ryuji and Izuku widened their eyes in confusion. What do you mean, not real? Izuku asked, unsure how to take such an answer. Before Morgana could answer, they heard distant marching from the path they came. Ugh, I don't have time to explain that. Just know that what I said is true. He may look like a human, but that thing is sort of like the shadows we've been fighting. Morgana summarized for them, looking back at their previous path and groaning. Look, I gave the best explanation I can for what little time we've got. I'm going. If you idiots want to save a meaningless fake, be my guest. Why you could be lying to make us go. Ryuji snapped back, only further confused by Morgana's explanation before turning to Izuku in question. What do you think? To his surprise, Izuku looked rather thoughtful, holding his chin. He might be right. Wait, what? You actually dash, the footsteps started to get closer, Ryuji grimacing at the thought of reinforcements. Look, curly hair seems to get it. If you trust him, then go on that hunch at least, Morgana exclaimed before turning back to the bridge. I gave you both what I can. I'm going. With that, Morgana dashed off by himself. Ryuji looked down at Izuku, pleading for a real answer. Izuku was sweating a bit, unsure of his choice, but nodded. Let's go, Sakamoto-senpai. I think I at least understand a bit of what he means. Izuku declared. Clicking his tongue, Ryuji nodded, resigning himself to running away. And right when I was getting all fired up about being a hero. The two quickly sprinted across the bridge. Thankfully, Morgana had been waiting for them at the other side, ushering for them to follow after. Once they caught up, he led them up a flight of stone stairs and through another door. This time, they were in familiar territory, the front entrance of this castle. This is the main hall we were captured in. Izuku muttered aloud, glancing at the front doors. Don't bother with that, they've probably locked it up after you guys just strolled in here, Morgana declared, waving a paw. This way, we'll go out one of the side entrances. He led them past the main doors, both boys a bit reluctant to pass by the freedom that looked so close, but decided to put their trust in the cat for now. Once they reached the opposite hall, they were faced with two doors. Alright, we're here, Morgana announced. Ryuji, in his haste, ran to the farthest door to the right, trying to bust it open with his shoulder but only finding it locked. DMN it. This thing won't open. Did you trick us after dash? Sakamoto-senpai. Ryuji looked up at Izuku to see him pushing the other door open, causing Ryuji to frown in. Embarrassment. You do realize that your exit was to the left, right? Morgana scoffed, picking on Ryuji as he shook his head and entered the room. Hey, wait up. Ryuji fumbled after the two, quickly closing the door behind them. Compared to anything they had seen so far, this room was quite modest. It had bookshelves around them and even a wooden table with chairs. Looking around, it seemed like they were still at a dead end, though Izuku was quick to spot out a way out. Up there, that ventilation. Izuku pointed out above the bookcase. It was covered by an iron mesh, but it didn't look particularly strong. You've got a good eye, curly hair. You're pretty quick on uptake, too. Unlike your blondie pal over here. Morgana chuckled, immediately causing Ryuji to click his tongue in annoyance. Don't call me blondie. The name is Ryuji. He snapped before looking up at the mesh. That shouldn't be too strong to pull off. Let me handle this one. Ryuji offered, setting down their school bags and climbing up the bookshelf. With several strong tugs on the mesh, the stone finally gave in, Ryuji falling on his back with a thud, but having successfully given them an exit. Ow. I hope no one heard that. Good job, Sakamoto-senpai. Izuku grinned, going to his side and helping the blonde stand. Shaking his body out, Ryuji seemed to be just fine, dusting off his shirt and pants. Alright, you two. Get going. Morgana ushered them out, Ryuji and Izuku turning to him in surprise. You're not coming with us? Ryuji asked curiously, stuffing his hands in his pockets. I've still got stuff I need to do here. This is where we part ways. Morgana explained, shaking his head. Thank you for your help, Morgana-san. Izuku said in appreciation, offering a small bow. Heh, you've got some manners. Morgana chuckled, pointing toward the. Now be careful on your dash. Be before I go, though. Izuku interrupted, glancing back up at Morgana. Do you think we have time to answer some questions first? Ryuji and Morgana blinked in surprise, the cat glancing back worriedly at the door. You know, he is right. After what you told us back there, some answers would be nice. Ryuji admitted, crossing his arms expectantly. Looking up between the two, Morgana released a heavy sigh, dashing back to the door and peeking out ever so slightly. The coast had been clear and he didn't sense any enemies close by. I suppose I can answer a couple questions, but make it fast. Not wasting any time, Izuku spoke up first. Back there, you said that those people in the cages weren't like us, that they were fake. What exactly do you mean by that? I was surprised you actually bought that. You really think those people aren't real? Ryuji spoke this time, looking at Izuku. I only sort of believe it. It made no sense that Kamoshida-sensei would have so many students locked up in some dungeon. There would have been reports of such massive numbers of students disappearing beforehand, and I haven't seen anything on the news like that of late, Izuku explained, his logic now bringing Ryuji pause. It could be argued that they had arrived at the same time as us, slightly before or after, but many of them looked like they had been held captive for a long time. We were also the only ones treated as intruders of the castle. Not to mention no one else is trying to run away or struggle. It makes no sense at all. Izuku laid out his thoughts for them, his insight on the situation surprising both of his companions. To be honest, it's becoming easier and easier to believe that they're not real people. But I still want to know how and why. Izuku's eyes fell expectantly to Morgana, who was in the middle of clearing his throat. I have to say, I'm surprised how fast you caught onto it on your own. I suppose since you've realized all that, I can be honest. This place, this castle and those kids. They are nothing but cognitive creations of someone with heavily distorted desires. All of which exist in the world of cognition. Cognition? Izuku repeated, raising a brow as he contemplated the answer. But wait see that doesn't make any sense. Ryuji exclaimed, jumping into the conversation. Kamoshida is here and everything. I know for sure that BSTRD is real. Though. I've never seen him dress or act like a complete but like that. That Kamoshida fellow, the king of this castle that you met, is both Kamoshida and not Kamoshida. Morgana declared, placing his paws on his hips. A shadow is the manifestation of negative human emotions. When a strong shadow exists, it attracts lesser shadows, which were the ones we were fighting up to this point. Another thing to remember is that this world of cognition exists alongside you at all times. Now, in this cognitive world, there are places that are generated by a shadow with strong, distorted desires. These places take up a small portion of this cognitive world for their own. This is what I like to call a palace. Wait, slow down. I'm having trouble processing all of this. Ryuji waved his hands, earning a tired sigh from Morgana. Izuku, on the other hand, just nodded in understanding. So basically, this place is how Kamoshida views the world around him on the inside, Izuku simplified so that Ryuji might understand a bit better. If that's true, then that means Shujin Academy really is like his castle to him, then. Wait, what? What do you mean? Ryuji snapped his head to look at Izuku, the green-haired teen glancing up at him now. Remember, Sakamoto-senpai. The sign outside of the castle said this was Shujin Academy. Even the path to get here was the same as the one you've normally taken before, right? Izuku pointed out for the blonde, having examined all of the data he collected in his mind. That means that Kamoshida-sensei's distortion exists the strongest at the school. He views it exactly the way you said he does. Oh. Ryuji widened his eyes, seemingly understanding it for himself, though Morgana doubted that he completely got it. I think I get what you're saying. That son of a beach. Ryuji cursed, huffing in irritation for a moment. Suddenly a thought occurred to him, his eyes widening in shock before turning to them. But wait, that still doesn't explain how we got here, though. That's true. That part is still a mystery. Izuku admitted, glancing at Morgana. Do you have any ideas? Sorry, nothing that comes to mind. You'll have to figure that one out on your own, Morgana admitted, glancing back at the door. Alright, I've answered enough questions for now. If you want to learn more about all of this, you'll have to come back here sometime. I've got my own objectives to fulfill. Now get going. Ryuji and Izuku glanced at one another and nodded. Izuku had at least gotten some answers from Morgana regarding this place, though he still had plenty of questions that he needed to ask. Still, what they had learned was better than nothing. Thank you, Morgana-san. Maybe we'll come back. Why yeah, I wanna know what the hell is really going on with this place, too. Ryuji nodded before climbing up the bookshelf. See you later, cat. I told you, I'm not a cat. Morgana snapped, only to be promptly ignored by the blonde as he climbed through the ventilation. The nerve of that guy. Morgana hummed to himself as he watched them climb out. Still, those two could be useful to me. Especially the curly-haired one. Izuku and Ryuji had sprinted for the gates once they had reached the outer wall of the castle. They went out the same way. They came through the alleys, only coming to a stop once they reached the main street. The sight of so many people was a huge reassurance to both boys as they gasped for air. So I guess we made it, then. Izuku glanced around at the city, noticing that people seemed to be going about their days like normal. He didn't know how or why, but it seemed that they had escaped the supposed world of cognition. I think we're safe. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, checking the signal. This time it was at full strength, but it looked like the ghost app that had haunted him before was still open on the center screen. You have returned to the real world. Welcome back. Wait, what did it say? Ryuji muttered. The real world? Ryuji scanned his surroundings again. Everything was perfectly normal. DDMN it, even though you and the cat explained everything, I'm still lost as hell. So wait, this app knew where we had traveled? Does that mean? Izuku mused to himself, a bit of sweat trailing down his brow. Was it because of this app that dash? Hey! You too! Ryuji and Izuku jumped at the sudden voice, turning to see two police officers approaching them, one towing a bike along. Shouldn't you both be in school? You're both students at Shujin, right? Are you cutting classes? The other officer asked, both looking at them with suspicion. What? No. Ryuji snapped, his previous irritation still lingering from his rather rough experience in the castle. We were on our way to school when Sakamoto-senpai. Izuku suddenly shouted, causing the blonde turn back to him in question. He quickly shook his head, hoping that Ryuji might get the message. He then turned to the officers and bowed heavily in apology. We're sorry, officers. We were running late because of the subway accidents that have been occurring. Ryuji blinked in shock and the officers raised a brow in question before looking at one another. Well, it is true that they've been thrown into chaos thanks to the accidents. One officer relented, turning back to both teens. Alright, you can go. Hurry up to Shujin now and don't make any stops. It's already late in the day as it is. Why yes, officers. We'll be sure to do just that. Izuku nodded, grabbing Ryuji's arm and pulling him toward the alley again. The blonde punk could only do a double take, looking at the officers and Izuku twice before conceding in silence, turning and following after his junior obediently. After the two were out of earshot, Ryuji snapped his head toward Izuku. What the heck, man? Why'd you stop me from telling them? If we're back in the real world, then it's safe to assume that the castle is gone, Sakamoto-senpai. Telling them that we just came from a castle might make them think we're on drags or something. Izuku explained for the blonde, Ryuji blinking in realization. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. Ryuji slumped his shoulders in defeat. So then, we're just gonna stroll back to school like nothing happened. I guess so. I really don't know what's going on or how we got there, but we have to pretend like nothing happened, okay? We'll have to look out for teachers too, since we're running so late. Izuku laid out for Ryuji to understand, the taller teen sighing. Yeah, I guess, but that SHT was so crazy. I can't believe we were in some friggin' castle. In some other world, no less. Ryuji exclaimed, the volume of his voice making Izuku flinch. He definitely wasn't kakin, but Ryuji was still pretty loud in his own right. Quirks and SHT be damned, this is a whole new effin' level of crazy. Just remember to keep to yourself about it, Sakamoto-senpai, no one will understand it except us. Izuku warned again, the blonde nodding in acceptance. After walking the same path that led them to that nightmarish place, the two couldn't help but hold their breath as they approached the school. When it came into view, they couldn't stop the sigh of relief to see the plain, boring school building that they had been expecting from the start. Ryuji then held up a finger, stopping Izuku in his tracks before peering around the corner of the main gate. Alright, looks clear. Doesn't look like those cops ratted us out. Ryuji declared, waving for Izuku to join him. We're still gonna get in heaps of SHT, but at least we don't have to deal with a teacher right off the bat. Ryuji sighed and scratched the back of his head. Today's been crazy as hell and I just want to get it over with. He looked back at Izuku and sighed. Let's talk about it more later. Meet me on the rooftop after school, okay? We'd better get to classes now and get over with. Alright, Sakamoto-senpai. I'll see you then. Izuku nodded, waving goodbye as the blonde departed. His class was on the 3rd floor, but if he remembered correctly, he was to see Kawakami first. She's likely going to be pretty upset when she sees me. Izuku sighed, hanging his head as he walked forward into the hall. It seemed strange that, after the day he'd had so far, Izuku would even be concerned about such things. But he was back in reality, and had to deal with real-life issues again. The moment he rounded the corner to climb the stairs, Izuku found himself bumping into someone, almost getting knocked down and having to regain his balance. I'm really sorry about Dash, he began apologizing until he saw who it was, Kamoshida. Oh, it's alright. No harm done. The coach waved off, offering a strangely kind smile to the green-haired teen. Izuku saw through it, though, the image of that king flashing before his eyes where Kamoshida stood. He had remained silent after the teacher's words, unintentionally staring at the coach in both fear and disgust. Seeing this, Kamoshida raised a brow. Is something the matter? Huh? Izuku blinked before realizing what he was doing. No. Not at all. I just need to find the faculty office. Izuku fumbled for an excuse, Kamoshida crossing his arms as he thought for a moment. Suddenly realization hit him. Oh, I know who you are. You're the transfer student, right? Kamoshida hummed, looking down on Izuku with a darker expression. You know, you're not going to help your reputation by showing up so late on the first day of school. Especially with that record of yours. Izuku flinched at the mere mention of his criminal record. So all the teachers were told about it, then. Out of everyone in school, Kamoshida would definitely rank as the one person he would have liked to not know about that after what he saw of his cognitive world. Without receiving a response, Kamoshida decided to continue. Well, you seem like a rather jumpy boy, so it's probably best that you don't draw any more unwanted attention to yourself. I'll overlook this for today. I'm sure the principal also told you this, but cause any trouble, and you'll be expelled, got it? Izuku hung his head low, not wanting to look into Kamoshida's eyes. Not out of shame, but more out of disgust for the man. I understand, sensei. Good. At any rate, head up this stairs and go down the hall on your right once you get up to the second floor. I'm sure Kawakami-sensei is tired of waiting for you. Kamoshida pointed out for Izuku, the teen nodding in acceptance and walking around the coach to hurry up the stairs. Oh, and by the way. Izuku stopped, glancing over his shoulder with one eye at the coach. Kamoshida gave a warm smile, but Izuku could sense the malice behind it. Good luck trying to enjoy your new school life here. Izuku raised a brow at that but said nothing. Kamoshida didn't wait for his reply either way, and continued down the hall. Thinking back to the coach's shadow, Izuku could tell that the man was in no way kind. That final comment was almost like he was taunting Izuku. But he couldn't tell why. Even if he's not a good person, would a teacher actually do bad things to his students? You seriously decided to show up to school this late on your first day? Izuku could only wince at Kawakami's words, her tone dripping with disappointment. Izuku hadn't been looking forward to seeing his teacher so late in the day, but he couldn't just not show up. So, he decided to face the music. This kind of thing bothered Izuku more than usual, probably because he was still incredibly tired from what most of his day had turned into. He had to agree with Ryuji on one thing, it really was a pain to survive such a harrowing experience and then go to school. Still, Izuku knew he had to do what he had to do. It was definitely strange to go from worrying about whether or not you're going to die to worrying about what your teacher and classmates would now think of you. I am sorry, Kawakami-sensei. The train was running really late because of all the accidents. Izuku lied, knowing that anything else he would say would most likely be brushed off. Even this was pushing it. To show his remorse, he deeply bowed to the teacher. It's true that the trains have been running late because of all the incidents. Kawakami trailed off for a moment before fixing him with a small glare. But still, it would have been faster if you just walked to school rather than waiting for the train to show up. True. Izuku muttered, scratching the back of his head. B. But I don't really know the area very well. A. And my phone's map is dash. Save it, alright. Kawakami huffed, shaking her head. Look, this is more about you than it is me. You shouldn't show up so late on your first day like this. Especially if you don't want start rumors about you. Alright. Izuku muttered, unable to look his teacher in the eyes. He felt terrible about lying like this, but there was no helping it. You also happened to show up around the same time as Sakamoto. Did you run into him? Izuku felt a bit of sweat rise from that question. Why yes. Sakamoto-senpai helped me find the school. Izuku technically wasn't lying this time. The blonde had definitely helped him in that regard. Among a great deal of other things. Really? Sakamoto did, said Kawakami. That's almost strong to believe. He's got a reputation as a real troublemaker around the school. Ditching classes, dyeing his hair, while it's nice that he did that for you, try not to get involved with him. Kawakami's eyes fell to the side, almost looking sorry for Ryuji. Although, he wasn't like that when he was keeping busy with the track team. Track team? Is that the reason why there's a history between him and Kamoshida-sensei? What happened? Kawakami considered the question for a moment before sighing. We don't really have time to go over that. Just try not hang around that kid, okay? Standing from her seat, the teacher grabbed several papers. The break PRD is about to end. We'll be headed to your 5th PRD class once it's over and I'll introduce you to your classmates. Also, because of the train accidents, class will end after 5th PRD. Try to head straight home afterwards, okay? Sakura-san sounded pretty upset when we notified him of your tardiness. Oh, right. Izuku had completely forgotten about his guardian. He hadn't wanted to disappoint the man who was kind enough to allow him to stay at his restaurant, and things had been going pretty well so far. No doubt this would cause a bit of friction. Anyways, let's get going. As it turns out, you're going to be in my first-year homeroom. Lucky me. Kawakami explained, muttering the last part loud enough that Izuku heard her, still. But that's not your next class. I'm just guiding you to it. Izuku nodded, and with that, the two finally departed. The bell had rung for the end of the break, so it was good time for them to leave now. As they passed through the hall for the stairs, Izuku didn't miss it when other students stopped to stare at him. He couldn't hear what they were whispering, but it definitely making him more comfortable. Why would anyone actually notice me? I might be new, but nobody should know about it yet. It wasn't long before they reached the classroom on the 3rd floor, Izuku gulping the moment it came into view. He was already bad at dealing with his classmates. His previous ones had been no better than Kaken when it came to bullying him. All because he was quirkless. Try not to attract attention to yourself, okay? Just looking at how skittish you are, I doubt you'd want everyone's eyes on you. Kawakami advised, turning back to Izuku and crossing her arms. So when you get called up to talk, try not to stutter so much and keep your introduction short. Alright. I'll do my best to keep it brief. Izuku nodded, nervousness starting to reverberate through his body. Kawakami watched him for a moment longer before releasing a small sigh and shaking her head. You're going to have a tough time, kid. She muttered before sliding the door to his class open. Thankfully they had a head start on most of Izuku's class, only a select few were in their seats and chatting casually among themselves. Good luck in there. Thank you for your help, Kawakami-sensei. Izuku bowed in appreciation before walking into the room. The teacher watched him for a moment longer before sighing, closing the door and taking her leave. To be honest, she felt bad for the green-haired teen. Part of her wanted to help him out, but she couldn't. Not after what happened with the first child she tried to help. She could never help a student out like that again. Izuku slowly moved to the back of the class. He would have to move once all of the students arrived, but for now he wanted to keep a low profile. It didn't seem to work though, as the small group of students already gathered suddenly went silent around him. When they thought he was out of earshot, they started to whisper. He could make out small phrases, the first few being transfer student and plain looking. That was the normal reaction he expected when he first arrived in class. But one sentence among them left him in complete and utter shock. He's definitely the one with a criminal record. What? How? Izuku thought with dread, his palms and forehead were already glistening with sweat. How do they know about that? As students started to walk into the class, Izuku noted one by one how each student looked at him. It had been painful enough to have peers look down on him for being quirkless, but this was totally different. To be feared as a criminal or some kind of villain who was just going to get thrown in jail. It hurt Izuku more than anything. He wanted to help people. He wanted to be a hero who could make people smile like All Might. Now, everyone around him just thought of him as a two-bit thug. Izuku had somehow gotten through his class in silence, only speaking at the front when the teacher made him greet his classmates, but he became dead to the world as soon as he returned to his desk. Once the bell rang, Izuku robotically stood from his seat and walked out of the classroom. He didn't bother trying to listen to those around him, nor did he care how the other students scooted out of his way or sped up if he seemed to be walking behind them. How did it happen? How did it get leaked on my first day here? Izuku had been struggling with that thought for the entirety of class. He just wanted to get through the school year in peace. But it seemed that some terrible higher being had it out for him. He couldn't even have the semblance of peace. His experiences in that cognitive world only served to compound his misery. He was overflowing with questions about the nature of the place and there weren't enough answers to satisfy him. You look like you're having a difficult time. Izuku stopped when he heard a girl speak around him. He lifted his head to look around, spotting a girl around his height with brown hair that reached down to the nape of her neck. Normally Izuku would be freaking out at the prospect of a girl talking to him, but his mind was too muddled by his trying day to think about that. In fact, he thought that she was talking to someone behind him and only turned away to keep walking. I was talking to you. Izuku hesitated after a moment before looking back at her again. Inspecting her more closely, Izuku realized that she looked very familiar. Her piercing red eyes were definitely something that made him feel nostalgic. Kaken had red eyes. And so did. See, can I help you? Izuku stuttered out, shaking his head of his previous thoughts. He doubted that he'd see her again. It was unlikely. Maybe even impossible. That's it? She asked, raising a brow in disbelief. That's all you have to say? Izuku was now beginning to set aside his questions, feeling the pressure of her gaze as his eyes started to widen in nervousness. Izuku was floundering in his own embarrassment, making exaggerated hand movements in vain attempts to articulate himself. The girl merely watched him with wonder before she started to smile, holding a hand up to her mouth and beginning to stifle her laughter. Izuku's cheeks flushed as she continued to mock him, turning to the side and hoping he could escape the girl before she was done laughing at him. I see you're still bad at talking to girls, Midori. Izuku immediately stopped when he heard that nickname for him. Only one person had ever called him Midori. And she had red eyes like that too. Quickly spinning around, the green-haired teen's jaw dropped. The girl, Makoto Nijima, offered a kind smile. Keikoto-san. Izuku exclaimed, feeling a mixture of emotions well up inside of him. Makoto had changed from when he last saw her. She was taller, slimmer, more mature. Definitely more girly than he remembered. Surprised to see me in something that isn't a t-shirt and shorts? Makoto asked with a small smirk of amusement, walking up a bit closer to Izuku to talk. Why you're really here? Izuku blurted out, still in a bit of disbelief. When I left, I told you that I wanted to go to a more academically focused school, didn't I? Makoto pointed out, placing her hands on her hips. Shujin might seem normal, but its accelerated programs are top-notch. I see, wow. Izuku muttered, straightening up and looking over Makoto for a moment. STST still. I can't believe I ran into you here. Yes, well, you weren't the only one surprised to realize we were going to the same school now, Makoto giggled with a small smile. It slowly started to fall, her eyes becoming more sullen as she continued to speak. But, from what I've heard, your circumstances are rather. What happiness Izuku might have had before vanished into thin air, a heavy frown forming on his lips as he looked down at the ground. So you heard, huh? He muttered out dejectedly, dread filling his voice. Makoto wringed her gloved hands, struggling to formulate a response. I saw your criminal record. Makoto admitted, her voice softening quite a bit. I couldn't believe that the sweetest kid I've ever known had somehow ended up with an assault charge. It was complicated. Izuku admitted, unwilling to look back up at his longtime childhood friend at first. But what I really want to know is, how did it get out? Why would someone do that to me? Tears threatening to spill from the corners of his eyes yet again. Makoto immediately regretted bringing up such a sore subject. Izuku had obviously been met with strange looks of ridicule already. She wanted to reach out and place a comforting hand on his shoulder, but hesitated. I am sorry that someone did that. I really am. I wish I knew who did it, but dash. Hey. Both teens blinked and they heard a familiar voice, Izuku immediately looking up to see Ryuji some ways down the hall, glaring at Makoto. Why you both aren't my pal here, Miss Student Prez? Makoto raised a brow in question, turning her attention away from Izuku and crossing her arms. Ryuji Sakamoto. Shujin Academy's most infamous troublemaker. I didn't realize you two were acquainted. Sakamoto-senpai. It's okay. Izuku suddenly spoke, moving between the two and holding his hands up. Keikoto-san is an old friend of mine from before I started school here. He quickly explained, wiping his eyes of any tears. Ryuji awkwardly shuffled his feet and rubbed the back of his head as he realized his mistake. Oh, my bad, didn't realize you knew anyone here. Sorry for interrupting ya, Ryuji cleared his throat before looking at Makoto. Sorry. He started to walk forward before placing a hand on Izuku's shoulder and leaning in close. Meet me up on the roof. I want to talk about what happened. Izuku widened his eyes when he heard Ryuji whisper but gave a small, almost unnoticeable nod. Even with everything that was going on right now in his school life, he would not ignore everything that just happened. With that, Ryuji took his leave, walking past the two and heading up the stairs of the third floor. First Baka-chan and now Ryuji Sakamoto. You certainly have a penchant for picking rather energetic friends, said Makoto, drawing Izuku's attention back to her. Izuku could only laugh sheepishly at that, scratching the back of her head. Why, you might not be wrong about that. Izuku admitted before clearing his throat. Sakamoto-senpai is a really nice guy, though. I met him on my way to school, and he helped me get here. In what little time they knew each other, Ryuji had tried to save him and stuck by his side even when it could have gotten him killed. It was safe to say that Izuku could trust Sakamoto and maybe even call him a friend. He was still nowhere near as rude as Kaken, anyway. I see. Makoto hummed in thought before sighing, shaking her head. Just try to be careful, okay? It's bad enough that, you know. Izuku didn't need her to elaborate on that point. His gaze drifted to the floor again, eyes half-lidded as he sighed. I think that, at this point, it wouldn't really matter who I spent my time with, Koto-san. He then looked up and gave a small smile. Besides, Sakamoto-senpai is pretty cool. Makoto opened her mouth to try and argue, but decided against it. If Izuku was able to make a friend despite the circumstance he was stuck in, who was she to argue? Still, Makoto couldn't help but act on the protective instinct she felt after seeing Izuku. Giving a small smile, the third-year student nodded in understanding. I see. Well Midori, I want you to know that if you need anything at all. She reached out and placed a gentle gloved hand on his shoulder. You can come to me with it. Okay. Izuku felt a smile tug at the corner of his mouth, nodding in appreciation. Okay. I will. Thank you, Koto-san. It's really nice to see you. Despite the fact that Makoto was a girl, she was the only one he had been comfortable talking to when they were younger. Even after so much time, he still felt comfortable talking to her, now. Nodding, Makoto gave a small smile before turning to take her leave. As she got further down the hall, Izuku decided to head up to the roof. Oh, before I forget. Makoto spoke up, causing the green-haired teen to pause and look back. I know things between me and him were strained at the end, but how is Baka-chan doing? Izuku would have laughed after remembering her derogatory nickname for bakugou. But the news he had to give her wasn't very good. He scratched the back of his head and sighed. Kaken, he was really hurt when you left. He started to act like a real bully again. Not the same way as before, but he just seemed to always be mad. Makoto frowned after hearing this, casting her eyes to the floor in remorse. I see, thank you for telling me that. With that, Makoto departed. The news didn't seem to sit too well with her, but there was nothing to do about it. Kaken was probably going to UA, anyways. They both wouldn't see him for a long time if at all. Though Izuku guessed they would see him in the news someday as the next big hero. Izuku slowly opened the door to the rooftop, hoping that Ryuji really was the only person there. When he saw the spiky-haired blonde, he relaxed a little and walked in, closing the door behind him as he did so. Hey, Sakamoto-senpai. Glancing around, he saw that the roof was fairly plain as well. There was a tall safety fence on the outer edge of the wall, likely to keep students and whoever else from sitting on the edge. One thing that stood out was a small garden box in the corner, filled with greens and freshly watered soil. Hey, Midoriya. Sorry to have you come here at the last SEC, Ryuji nodded. He was sitting by a stack of classroom desks and chairs, sitting in one of the free chairs. Though, I'm kinda shocked. I didn't think you'd be all cozy with the student council prez. WLUSC we us used to be old friends from Izuku began to timidly explain, hoping that Ryuji wouldn't get the wrong idea about them. Slow down, dude. It's fine, Ryuji assured, waving a hand in the air. I just thought it was funny. She's such a prim and proper kinda chick, and you're the kid with the criminal record, right? Izuku frowned at the mention of that again. I shouldn't be surprised he knows, too, everyone seems to know. He thought to himself, gripping his hand in frustration. So the whole school knows now, huh? Ryuji frowned, I'm sorry, man. I didn't mean to get you down like that. If it helps, I kinda thought it makes you look cooler. Ryuji suggested with an awkward chuckle. Seeing that Izuku was still downcast, the faux blonde sighed and shook his head. Sorry about that. It's fine, it's certainly not the worst thing to happen to me today, right? Izuku laughed weakly, trying to brush it off. He would never be able to get rid of the thought entirely, but it helped if he could focus on another subject. Especially when it was something that had given him powers, if only for a short while. Yeah, that's definitely true. Ryuji nodded, leaning forward on his knees. But DMN, all that SHT was so crazy, with Kamoshida, that castle and the cat, are we sure it wasn't just a dream? Izuku's expression hardened seriously, shaking his head. It's safe to say that everything we saw was real, Sakamoto-senpai. As strong as it is to believe, we entered a world based on cognition. Man, you say that, but that SHT only confuses me more. Ryuji grumbled, scratching the top of his head. I mean it all felt so real, no doubt, but... I dunno, do you think that heroes have to put up with this kinda SHT? Izuku gave it some thought, holding his chin. It's not impossible that some heroes might know about it, but it's not likely many people do know of it, as well. Looking back up at Ryuji, another question popped in his mind. About that, have you seen Kamoshida-sensei? He was definitely unaware of what happened. Why yeah, I saw him today. That BSTRD. Ryuji spat in irritation. Waved and said hi like nothing, too. That BSTRD should know exactly what happened in that castle, right? Izuku took a moment to think this over again before shaking his head. No, not necessarily. If what Morgana-san was saying is true, then even though it's the darkest part of his heart, it's still not technically him. Izuku explained as he looked back up at Ryuji. That's fortunate, honestly, as it means he won't be looking at us for anything that happened in the castle. Alright. I think I get it. Ryuji hesitantly answered. Even though Izuku seemed to be able to understand all of what happened rather easily, he was still trying to play catch-up. Speaking of that jerk, the way he acted in that DMN place made way too much sense. You said that's how the BSTRD views the school, right? That's right. Kamoshida-sensei truly thinks he is the ruler of this school. I still don't really know much about him, but based on what we saw there's no denying it. Izuku confirmed for him, Ryuji biting his bottom lip in frustration. That arrogant prick. He thinks he's some big shot just because he got a medal and took the volleyball team to nationals. Ryuji huffed in irritation. But he treats his players like SHT. No one's willing to say a DMN thing about it, though. Izuku could only remain silent. Aside from the brief encounter with the real one and the very excruciating encounter in the world of cognition, he couldn't judge what actions that Kamoshida might have been like before. After taking a moment to cool off, Ryuji leaned forward and became more thoughtful rather than angry. Do you think we might be able to go back to that world somehow? Izuku's thoughts immediately went to the phone app. It had announced itself when they first left like it knew where they had gone. It certainly was the biggest possibility. I think we might, but it'd be dangerous, but I do want to learn more about that place. Yeah. Ryuji nodded, leaning back in his chair again and kicking his foot up over his knee. But anyway, regardless of real or not, you really saved my butt in there. Twice I think it was. He smiled, giving a genuinely appreciative grin. Thanks for all that, man. Izuku blinked in surprise after hearing that before offering a kind smile of his own. Of course. Thank you for sticking up for me the first time, too. What little good that did. That power you pulled out really saved our asses, though. Ryuji chuckled, thinking back the large being that came from Izuku. Do you think that you can still summon it? Maybe sort of like a quirk. Izuku blinked, having not thought of that possibility. It wouldn't be outlandish to think that he might be able to after the day they had. Trying to focus on Carter now, Izuku tried to will him into existence, closing his eyes. He didn't feel any change nor could he hear the persona's voice again. With a sigh, Izuku shook his head. I don't think so, it must only be in that world that it's possible. Well, that's a bummer. Would have been pretty DMN cool to tote that around as your quirk. Ryuji shrugged, not thinking too much of it. Standing up from his seat, Ryuji stretched out. Well, that's really all I had to say about it. Sorry if I wasted your time. And no, it's alright. Really. I wanted to talk about what happened, as well. After all that, I don't think we can just brush it off as a dream. Yeah, I guess you got a point on that one, Ryuji nodded in agreement before giving a small grin. But hey, after all the SHT we've been through in one day, I think I like you. You're pretty DMN gutsy for a kid who acts so meek. He chuckled, Izuku laughing sheepishly in response. From now on, if you don't mind, we can be partners in crime. Everyone looks down on us anyway, so we might as well become troublemaking pals, right? While Izuku wasn't one to really cause trouble, he understood what Ryuji was saying. I'd really appreciate that, Sakamoto-senpai. Alright. Enough with the senpai stuff, Ryuji chuckled, stuffing his hands in his pockets. You can call me Ryuji from now on. If you don't mind, I'll call you Izuku. There's no need to act all formal if we're gonna be pals. This notion seemed to throw Izuku in a strange place. It had been a long time since he had actually called someone by their full first name. Sure. I can try and do that. Ryuji-senpai. I mean dash. Whoa man, no need to bust a vein over it. Take your time, Ryuji replied, waving a hand dismissively. Anyway, I'm gonna head back. I'm pretty sure you're worse off, but I'm tired as hell. You should get going, too. Izuku wouldn't argue with that. He felt like he could sleep for a week after escaping that place, not to mention how tired he felt mentally after first summoning his persona and his trying day at school. It would be a long ride home on the train. Alright then. I'll see you later, Ryuji-senpai dash. Dude, seriously. Take your time with it. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 3. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and author Mugiwara and no Luffy on FANFICTIONnet. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.